please, let's take part. It is part of what we are supposed to be doing. It keeps us all nice and healthy. This afternoon, our focus is on engineering education in the sub-region. We want to make sure that what we do across board, it is okay. And I mean, this one, it is WAFU. So it goes beyond us. I like what University of Ghana, established in 1948. Thank you very much. Majority of us here didn't go to University of Ghana, but we still appreciate. They say they are the premier university. So, but majority of us, our provost is here. He's going to give the first presentation. So we want to invite to the podium, since this is WAFU, I'm handing over to I've been corrected, that is the Executive Secretary. General Secretary of the West African Federation of Engineering Organizations, and our own Executive Director, Ghana Institution of Engineering. Let's put our hands together and invite Engineer Kwabna Eje. Oh, is it that lunch is not enough? Or let's clap well.
Thank you very much, Engineer Harold. A good afternoon to you once again. I want to hear you louder. Thank you very much. This is a seminar for WAFU, and it's going to be chaired by our president, Engineer His Royal Highness, Engineer Otis Anyeji. So can you give them a wave? Anytime we have a conference in one of the member states, we use the opportunity to have a seminar. We had one on telecoms in Freetown in June last year. We had one in November in Abuja on energy, and we decided that we'd do this one in Ghana on engineering education. The lead of the committee is Professor Redwood Sawyer, who is also the president of the Sierra Leonean Institute of Engineers. He will do his presentation, but I'm going to break protocol slightly because of our alma mater. The Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology is here. So we'll call on our own Professor Mark Adom Asamoah to give his presentation first. After that, after all that, the chairman will round it up with some remarks. Thank you. Professor Adom Asamoah.
Thank you. Let me take this opportunity to congratulate wine. I'd like to say that the women are doing very well. 2 years ago, we had a female. The second overall student was a female. She did civil engineering. The story about her, which also dovetails into today's discussion, is that he is a foreign student who came from Togo. So Constance came from Togo. All she had done before that time was to study in French. And then she came in, she did 1 year of study in English and rolled onto our civil engineering program. He gave everybody a run for their money. It took up to the final semester, 4th year, second semester, for a guy to dislodge her of that position of the highest average in the university. And the guy was able to beat her by 0.03. So Constance graduated with a CWA of 82.39. And as I speak, I'm trying to arrange for funding for her to go and study in Canada. We are just giving these examples for us to know that our ladies are doing extremely well. And we need to encourage them. We always say that science is not for females. But surprisingly, you go to medical school and now they are doing 50-50. it's 50% female, 50% male in the medical schools. Engineering across the world is doing about 10%. And it's something that we need to work on. So I would like to congratulate WINE and also encourage all of us to also encourage our daughters. As you may have seen, teachers can talk and talk and talk forever. We are like pastors. So what I decided to do was to put my thoughts on paper so that I would be able to go direct to what I want to say. So please forgive me. I want to give, at this juncture, I want to give a formal presentation. So Chairman, President of GHIE, past presidents, Honorable Minister, ladies and gentlemen, all protocol observed. Sub-Saharan Africa is home to the largest share of the global poor and demonstrates the widest poverty gap. Of the 767 million people living below the poverty line, 389 million, that is 51%, are in sub-Saharan Africa. The poor are characterized by poor education and unemployment. To achieve strong economic growth and reduce poverty, increase productivity across key economic priority sectors, economic diversification, and implementation of structural reforms are needed. Human capital development is essential for increasing productivity and promoting economic diversification. Currently, Sub-Saharan Africa economies are highly dependent on unskilled labor and natural resources, preventing the region from moving up the value chain and becoming more specialized in knowledge-intensive and high-value activities. In 2010, the share of researchers in Senegal and Ghana engaged in engineering and technology-related research was 2% and 13% respectively, compared to 62% in 2013 in Singapore. In 2014, the number of researchers per 1 million inhabitants in South Korea was 6,899 compared to only 88 per 1 million inhabitants in Sub-Saharan Africa. While Sub-Saharan Africa is home to 14% of the world's population, our share of global expenditure on research and development is only 0.8%. Improved productivity can be achieved by equipping the workforce with relevant science and technology skills and ensuring they have the competencies necessary to develop, adapt, and apply solutions to the sectorial challenges of Africa. This, I must say, must be the core mandate and the driving force of all engineering institutions in the African sub-region, and those of us in West Africa are no exception. The College of Engineering, KNUST, is philosophy. The College of Engineering was established in 1951 and has the mandate of training engineers to drive the industrial revolution. We currently run 18 undergraduate programs and several postgraduate programs. In fact, we are running about 40 postgraduate programs with a combined student population of 7,000, out of which 560 are postgraduate students. We recognize that the training of our students will be incomplete without some experience from industry. We have therefore made it compulsory at the College of Engineering for our students to have a minimum of 8 weeks of industrial training before they can graduate to their various degrees. We encourage our students to undertake additional professional certification while in school For an instance, our students are currently engaged in Cisco Academy and Huawei ICT Academy certification programs. This we do to ensure that our graduates are not only the best in theory, but have hands-on experience of practical work as well. Investment in laboratory equipment. Recognizing the need for the significant roles laboratories play in developing the needed manpower for industry, we have invested 5.6 million euros in retooling of our laboratories, an additional $13.6 million worth of equipment from the World Bank for our petroleum and chemical engineering laboratories. Mindful of the strategic role postgraduate education plays in driving our economy, the college, with the help of the government of Ghana and the World Bank, is strengthening its postgraduate programs to the level of a center of excellence as far as postgraduate education in the sub-region is concerned. In particular, we have received 17.4 million US dollars for water and environmental sanitation, transportation research, and college-wide add-on, which have components for software acquisition and laboratory equipment. These projects are running from 2019 to 2023. Quality assurance and harmonization of standards at the national level. Engineering education thrives on quality, and the way to measure and to ensure compliance with standards is to have a body with the regulatory authority and the courage to ensure that all institutions, big and small, comply with laid down regulations as far as engineering training is concerned. The National Accreditation Board is the body mandated by law to ensure that all engineering programs are properly accredited and are complying with all rules governing engineering education in Ghana. The board, in an effort to harmonize engineering training in all accredited institutions, is pursuing a bold initiative of harmonizing the curriculum of all similar programs with the aim that irrespective of where one trains, quality will not be compromised. This bold move by the National Accreditation Board is considered to be a first step towards harmonization of engineering education in the West African sub-region. If we can agree on a standard curriculum for the various programs in engineering in the West African sub-region, harmonization becomes easier and students can seamlessly move from one institution to the other with no difficulty in transferring credits obtained as a result of harmonized curriculum. The role of industry in ensuring quality engineering education. Industry plays a role in the training of quality graduates. Most of our graduates constitute the workforce as far as industry is concerned. And as such, industry has a significant input as far as curriculum review of old programs and development of new programs is concerned. Additionally, most of our students gain practical hands-on experience working with industry during their internships. As we move towards regionalization and harmonization of engineering education in West Africa, the opportunities are numerous. Key among them is the possibility of our students crossing borders to gain practical experience in overseas industries. In this regard, we will be looking at not just a harmonization of engineering training, but a cross-cultural experience as well. Steps towards regional harmonization. It is evident that with harmonization, we will be looking at not just individual colleges of engineering, but one super college, which I call a West African College of Engineering, WACO. To realize this dream, it is necessary to put together a working group comprising experts from academia, industry, professional bodies such as GHIE, the ECOWAS Commission, with assistance from UNESCO, to study this proposal and table a working document for the consideration of WAFIO. It will be important to set up a West African accreditation board to ensure compliance among colleges under WACO. Mr. Chairman, a number of core benefits can already be envisaged from the harmonization process itself. One obvious benefit is some bridging of the traditional Francophone-Anglophone divide in West Africa. It will also afford schools and colleges of engineering in the sub-region an opportunity to reflect together on how engineering education can be reoriented to play its proper role in confronting the challenges that are common to our various countries. That is, the challenges of industrialization, infrastructure development, poverty reduction, and more generally, the attainment of sustainable development goals. It will also afford us the opportunity to acquaint ourselves with the content and structure engineering education in sister countries, as well as the philosophies that undergird them. Moreover, new partnerships and friendships developed in the process can be leveraged in support of our various mandates, that is, teaching and research. I believe in action, and in my candid opinion, the establishment of WACO is long overdue, and steps need to be taken as soon as possible. I do recognize that most universities within the colleges are established by acts of parliament, and there may be legal hurdles to surmount. I am, however, convinced that where there is a will, there will always be a way. It is refreshing to note, Mr. Chairman, that the KNUST College of Engineering has already obtained international accreditation for 5 postgraduate programs, and we are working and initiating steps to accredit more of our programs internationally. ICT as an enabler. With the advancement in ICT and its accompanying applications to facilitate distance learning, students in the West African sub-region do not always have to travel to receive training and mentorship from members of faculty in their sister universities. They will have to join the class using a good internet connection. Most professionals in the West African sub-region have various degrees in management and the lies from universities all over the world without having to travel to these institutions. Such a model comes in handy as far as the operations of WACO is concerned. Through the power of ICT, students from different colleges can team up and execute projects anywhere within the sub-region. By so doing, they get to share their experiences as well as create the foundation for stronger international collaborations in future. The global experience. Most colleges within the sub-region already have collaborations with counterpart universities the world over. Harmonization will enable colleges within the West African sub-region to share their collaborations with member colleges with the eventual outcome of creating a global experience among staff and students. Conclusion. I came here today with the aim of triggering a discussion and not to offer a conclusive solution towards harmonization. It is my hope that as we engage in further discussions, the ideas suggested will crystallize into blueprints of action plan towards harmonization of engineering education in West Africa. Today, we perceive it as an idea. In a few years, we will realize the great benefits of the steps we took in this room. Let us conclude by thanking the leadership of Wafio, for the opportunity to share these thoughts with you. I thank you, my friends, from far and near for your attention. Before I sit down, let me reiterate the point that there is tremendous potential in West Africa. And the way to fully realize what we can achieve is for us to work together. Today, WACO is only a dream. It is my hope that we will wake up from the dream, all working towards making it a reality. Mr. Chairman, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Mark Adumas Samoa. I want to acknowledge the presence of the Registrar of the Engineering Council of Ghana, our own Wise Ametepe, the only wise engineer. We also want to acknowledge the presence from Nigeria of engineer Dr. Opoti Alex Momo, Executive Director of the Nigerian Society of Engineers. My good counterpart. In Nigeria, it's Executive Secretary. Sometimes it's General Secretary. It's all the same. Anyway, our second presenter is the chair of the West African Engineering Federation's Subcommittee on Education, and he's also the president of Sierra Leone Institute of Engineers. Institution of Engineers. Let's put our hands together for Professor Redwood Sawyer.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. The president of the Ghana Institution of Engineers, the past president, I'm not very good at protocols, and all other protocols, and I stand on existing protocols. Thank you very much. Yes, my own presentation really is going to hover around the whole concept of quality assurance, because like my senior colleague mentioned, the common ground that all higher education institutions may need to converge towards would be quality assurance. And there are many definitions of quality assurance, but in essence, it really is meant to ensure that certain predetermined benchmarks are met. And all universities have their vision and mission and so on. But in general, we try to see how we can align these processes to our mission and vision. Again, as again mentioned earlier, when we look at academic quality assurance, we're looking at the activities of teaching, research, and scholarship, and essentially maintaining academic standards and academic integrity. Now, I'll just take ours, for example. I'm sure this is reflective of many universities. We tend to have the same focus and the same objectives. For the University of Sierra Leone, the vision statement is a friendly world-class center of excellence, responsive to the needs of society. And the mission is a university that demonstrates its commitment to generating and transmitting knowledge through quality teaching and research for sustained development, and whose products are nationally and internationally competitive. Now, essentially, when we look at harmonization, what I'm trying to do, or what I hope I would achieve, is to lay the groundwork which hopefully would trigger the conversation on how we can move towards this whole matter of harmonization. So essentially, these are just some tools that we may want to consider. Of course, in any higher education institution, the matter of teaching, learning, pedagogy, and of course, aligning our curriculum using minimum academic standards. Then, of course, the matter of research publication and scholarly contribution. And the third one really is quite an important item because it looks at external engagement with a view to ensuring that our graduates are employable. And that is where the alignment of our curricula comes into full view, because the alignment would need to be reflective or responsive to the demand of the job market. So these are just some of the tools that we may need to look at in moving towards a framework of harmonization for a West African quality assurance policy framework. Now, I often mention that the whole learning process or higher education process is like a learning factory. And this is the concept I normally throw around. That if we look at the diagram there, you know, the items that feed into the operation of the factory are, one, the raw material, which, you know, forgive me calling the students our raw material, but if we want to look at an analogy in a factory, they are our raw material. Then, of course, the issue of resources, that is the staff quality mix, the working environment, and, of course, the learning environment. These components feed into the factory, and the final product, of course, would be the students. And the reliability of the process actually depends, or is a function of A and B. Not exclusively, but a function of A and B. Then, in terms of quality assurance, there has to be a process of maintaining a high reliability of our product. That is quality as a function of time. And of course, that product has to have an element of transferability. Now, the universities have a bit of a dilemma, because whereas on the one hand, we need to have a curriculum which is relevant to the job market, we also need to have a curriculum which would promote the chances of our students opting for postgraduate work. So there has to be that balance, although it appears as a dichotomy, but that has to be looked at. Then, of course, many of our universities are under-resourced. I actually envy KNUST when they're talking about so many millions of dollars. Some of us in less endowed universities, you know, are envious of them, you know. But all the same, you know, we'll see how it goes. Maybe partnership, some of them might rob. Some of those funding might rub off on less endowed universities as we move towards harmonization. Yes. So that is one. And then, of course, the demands imposed by ranking and accrediting bodies. This is a concept which, although many of us try to dismiss it as a media ploy, it no longer is. Vice chancellors are really looking at the figures, and students are also looking at the figures. So, and really, some very credible ranking organizations have emerged. So we need to take that very seriously. Of course, in-country and external competition for students. You may be head of a university, but then there may be other universities, local and also international. That's an added layer in terms of maintaining your integrity. Of course, Prof mentioned the matter of cross-border requirements for quality assurance and accreditation. Now, all of these forces are being called to play in terms of the university meeting its mandate and being relevant. And of course, as far as the productive graduate is concerned, these are some of the elements we'd like to see in our graduates. First of all, of course, soft skills. And quite often, soft skills are not evident in our curricula. And employers are complaining that while our students or our graduates are quite equipped in terms of theoretical knowledge, soft skills tend to be in the deficit, i.e. communication skills, teamwork, you know, and so on and so forth. And hands-on skills, industrial experience, community service, and so on. Now, quite a number of our institutions do run internships. And I heard that about 8 weeks or so for KNUST. We also try between 6 and 8 weeks, and it's compulsory for all students. And of course, the field-specific knowledge, which quite often our students are very grounded in. Now, these are some of the factors that, again, can reshape or shape the university's mandate. Number one, of course, staff quality and mix how many professors do we have in the institution compared to senior lecturers or associate professors and so on, or research and teaching assistant. There are times when you may look at a department, the most qualified personnel in that department might be a senior lecturer. There might be no associate professors or professors. That's a component we need to look at very seriously. Of course, international accreditation, well, that one I probably might want to modify, both national and international accreditation. Of course, the whole matter of curriculum development, aligning it with other benchmarks and also with, of course, the demands of the job market. And budgetary provisions, which I mentioned earlier. Quite often our programs are under-resourced. And of course, the interplay with government. Many of us who have been vice chancellors know full well what this means. There are times when you may have, I don't know if it happens everywhere, but there are times when you have a student protest, you go through a discipline committee, you mete out judgment to the students, and the next thing you have a call from State House. And that can be quite foreboding. For those of you who have gone to Sierra Leone, I remember when I was vice chancellor and the chief of staff called me and the pro-chancellor when we had a similar situation. So I asked him, I said, why is it that Fabe College, University of Sierra Leone, always seems to be a sensitive issue when we have strike action? We have our sister universities up country about a few kilometers away. And he said, well, you are too close to State House. so anything that happens in your campus would reflect on State House. So the interplay with government can also be quite a force to reckon with. But in general, the graduate's expectation is to have a program that would align his expectations in terms of the preparation for the job market, and also, of course, that would enable him to hit the ground running. And this really is a big challenge, because quite often as students graduate, they enter the job market and they would need to undergo further training. And some industries are very impatient. They want their students to hit the ground running. They want them to be productive. They want them to know all about program management and so on. That's another conversation. And, well, how are these strands to be connected towards harmonization? I mean, the issues I've raised, how then do we put all of them together in trying to ensure a harmonized solution for engineering education? Well, these are some issues that universities must endeavor to achieve. We must be drivers of and incubators of innovation and capacity building, especially in STEM. We need to be institutions where knowledge is generated through research and innovation to create technology that will transform national economies from their state of dependency on foreign support to one of providing services to promote emerging technologies that will add value to the processing of raw material often prevalent in our countries, and of course this whole concept of lifelong learning and CPD. Also, we need to explore the various needs of our clientele, and number one, we need to provide contemporary forms of pedagogy. Now, many universities are now trying desperately to move away from the teacher-centered learning framework to the student-centered learning. And there are quite a number of options which can assist us in that process. Team-based learning, problem-based learning, online facilities like the MOOCs. These all provide an alternative method of teaching and, of course, learning that can be explored. And we do have unserved communities. I think my senior there mentioned something about distance learning. And obviously, if we set up a system whereby those who may not be able to visit our campuses can also access our programs online, that can also expand the outreach to students. And of course, I've just mentioned the last one, migrate from traditional teacher-centered to student-centered learning and teaching. Now, I'm just going to throw this. There are quite a number of initiatives ongoing. It's not as if the area is a desert area. There are quite a number of activities. The African Union and EU strategic partnership under the AU and EU, they've selected harmonization, quality, and accreditation as a focal point in terms of a joint Africa-EU strategy. And here, special attention has been given to harmonization. So that's an ongoing endeavor. And there are quite a number of goals which have been achieved towards this whole matter of harmonization. And here it's stated that they would want this process to bridge the gap between disparate educational systems in Africa. There's a need to promote inter-African academic mobility, joint curriculum development, strengthening institutional partnerships among HEIs, facilitate the recognition of qualifications, and of course, effective assurance mechanisms. Now, I just want to mention a few experiences, especially in terms of mobility and common standards. When we had our problems, both when we had the war and also when we had the Ebola crisis, specifically when we had the war, many of our students left home and went to other African universities. But because we did not have a kind of a credit transfer facility or mechanism, we were not talking to, universities were not talking to each other to know what our academic standards were or what our minimum academic standards were. And there were some students who were in year 3, they went to some other universities because they did not know much about University of Sierra Leone or our programs in engineering. They had to almost start the whole program again at year 1, And it can be quite a challenge. That is why a program like this, where we would have a forum to look at what we offer, the minimum academic standards could be established, then credit transfer would then be, like a common activity among our universities. And so we also would need to recognize the qualifications that are given by our various universities. But of course, that can only happen if we recognize the programs they are offering, the entry standards, and of course, what kind of benchmarks they are promoting. Well, again, I'm hoping that during the conversation towards harmonization, we would look at the issue of agreement, synchronizing our various processes, leading towards the award of a degree. And one thing I wanted to hasten to mention is that harmonization is not synonymous with standardization. This at times creates some confusion, creating uniformity or achieving identical higher education systems. What we may need to move towards is having minimum academic standards, which can be recognized in any of our institutions. And that then can move towards greater possibility of both staff and student mobility. Again, if we're looking at the whole process of harmonization, we need to look more carefully into how the various benefits are rolled out in this process. Because clearly, some universities might be more endowed than others, and so there has to be a platform where we can recognize the minimum standards that would enable a student to move from one university to the other seamlessly. Now, this is another program that is ongoing. It's called the Tuning, in fact, at times referred to as Tuning Stroke Harmonization Process. It's meant to develop curricula through identification of learning outcomes and competencies. And interestingly, when you look at some of the documents from accrediting bodies, the issue of outcomes and competencies, what are at times loosely referred to as attributes, feature very strongly. So that could be a pathway, and we can actually establish the various learning outcomes for every level in engineering, both in terms of theoretical knowledge, in terms of hands-on, and that can actually provide us a platform for comparison and, of course, for identification of common standards. And this process also provides us with the possibility of credit transfer. There's another effort, which is called the African Quality Rating Mechanism, and this is not like the ranking. Now, what this does is to just compare, it's like a league table comparing various higher education programs, and it's meant to facilitate staff and student mobility. And it also compares the performance of one university with another. As I said, it's not a ranking process. It's more closely attuned to quality assurance rather than the kind of ranking we see in the other processes. And African governments, I think, are struggling to provide a fit-for-purpose curriculum. And as I said, there's that dichotomy, and curriculum developers are always faced with that dichotomy. What should take precedence? Building up the competencies of our students or our graduates for postgraduate work, or emphasizing on the job market. And curricula need to be reflective of those two demands. And of course, another initiative is the Pan-African Quality Assurance and Accreditation Framework, PANAFQ. In fact, they have been running quite a number of programs on quality assurance, especially aimed at regional integration. Now, again, many of our institutions do have both internal and external quality assurance bodies, and these would need to be capacitated, and we would need to share best practices among ourselves, drawing from some of the experiences in Europe and so on. And of course, hopefully, we would have the political support in regional cooperation. Well, I'd like to acknowledge WAFIO, Ghana Institution of Engineering, and also, of course, my university. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Soria. Let's give him another round of applause. That is a lot of food for thought for all of us going forward. As I said earlier on today, I acknowledge some of our sponsors. We are happy to recognize the presence of the CEO of Cosmos Energy, Nana Joe Mensah. Let's have a clap for him. He's a member of the institution, and also they support the institution very strongly. We want to encourage a lot more engineering organizations to support your parent institution, which is the Ghana Institution of Engineers. Just a little reminder to all of you here, having spoken about continuous professional development, attending this conference, if you are able to go through all the technical sessions, attracts 6 CPDs. Only 6. And I think I have to remind you that according to the competency requirements of the GHIE, every member is expected to earn a minimum of 18 CPDs to earn the renewal of your certification to practice. You want me to repeat that? You need to earn a minimum of 18 CPDs per year, annually, for your certification to practice to be renewed. According to the new law, the Engineering Council law, every 31st December of the year, it lapses. And we give you a couple of months to straighten things out. So at least you earn a third of your CPDs for this year just attending this conference. So endeavor to get involved in the activities of the institution. There are also new ways. In fact, the new CPD manual will be launched tomorrow at the closing session. And they will show you the various ways that you can attract CPDs without having to sit physically in a room such as this one. Our next presentation comes from someone who has had several years lecturing at the University of Witwatersrand in South Africa. He's also the chair of International Standards Organization Construction Standards Committee. Let's put our hands together for Dr. Ron Rottermeier of the Weber Conference.
Thank you. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I'm from South Africa. I'm a 7th generation African. And yeah, I am. And I've come to Ghana over the last few years through Weber has brought me out to do some courses and seminars. Just one correction, I'm just a visiting professor, not a permanent professor, so I'm a non-academic. I'm also a past president of the institution of, let me just get this going. I'm a past president of the South African Institution of Civil Engineering in 2004, and I've been a board member or a trustee of the Institution of Structural Engineers, which is a UK-based international organization. Now, when I was asked to address this conference, I obviously don't know much about what goes on in academia around this area, and I wanted to take a broader view on education to look at not just the universities, but also what does the institution do. I've been more involved my whole life with institutions and what can they do. To me, the starting point in the discussion is what is the future of the profession. And so I want to take a slightly different angle to try and see what are we going to be teaching, what do we need to do to get the profession going. So when I looked at it, the future of education is going to be linked to the future of the profession. And what I've done is I've taken from the Institution of Structural Engineers, as a matter of interest, about a year ago at one of our council meetings, we discussed the topic of what will the profession look like in 10 to 15 years' time, and what might be the role of the institution in supporting the profession. And I think those are the two questions one has got to ask and answer before you can say what we're going to do. So I will try and address that, and just very simply, from the institution's future of the profession, from the Institution of Structural Engineers, they identified 7 great areas, the priority areas. I will touch upon some of them because I think they have relevance here, and I will also contextualize it into an African context. The first is rethink the education of engineers. Millenniums and digital natives, we have a completely different cross-section in the profession. I don't see many of the younger generation, the digital age, sitting amongst the audience. How are we going to bring that in? Because they speak a different language, they operate completely differently, and that's the world we're going to build into the future. We also need to aim for greater engagement with the construction industry and contractor. We need to broaden our outlook and not just be, I'm an engineer and isolated. We need to engage other professions. We need to have greater links between research and practice, educate members on key areas of disruption, as we've seen with the disruption that's recently occurred in Mozambique with some of these extreme events. And we need to enable the progression of technicians. That's what came out of our council meeting. I will touch upon some of these things as I go along. So what I want to do is to give you a practicing engineer's perspective. I'm a practicing engineer, not an academic. So my issue is, I'd like to start off with what is the scope of engineering practice, to have some understanding. What is the purpose of universities? I think we need to answer those questions. We need to think about how is the profession structured, because how are we going to support this education? What is it supporting? What are the future drivers of change? If we're going to start asking the question, what is happening in 10 to 15 years' time? We need to understand what the drivers are. And I think there's 2 drivers. There are those that I can give you from, you could say, a global perspective from the developed countries, but we also need to have our own developing country perspectives to get to the right answers. We need to watch what the others are doing elsewhere in the world, that we're not caught out, but to contextualize it into our context as well. And then I'll give some suggestions for the role of higher education institutions and learned societies in education in a changing landscape. And obviously, not knowing what goes on here, I have the freedom to be outrageous or whatever to try and get discussion going, because I'm not talking from inner knowledge. Now, the first thing is, let's look at engineering practice. I see that one of the issues we need to address is that not all engineering is focused on the same thing. I see that there's 2 groupings within the engineering profession. Those that are involved in the built environment, and if you scan down here, you can see those that are typically involved in it. And what I wanted to say is the built environment, the way I see it, is the collection of man-made or induced physical objects located in a particular area or region, which basically translates into buildings, external works, and other construction works. Those that are involved in building. The other side is those that are involved in the non-built environment. What I would call would be more of the vehicles, equipment, industrial processes, etc. So look, I'm going to be talking primarily from the construction side of things, because that's where the majority is, that's where I come from. Those of you that are not directly involved in the construction industry, hopefully you can take some of the principles that I'm talking around as well. It's always a difficulty when you have an institution or an engineering profession that spans 2 sectors. It's very broad, and I'm a civil engineer from background, so therefore I'm in the majority. I think you told me it's 51% of your members are civils, so we're the majority. Okay. So let's kick off and think of a few things. And I've taken this from a colleague of mine, Professor Eunice Ballum, who's the Vice Chancellor of Sol Plaatje University. He is, in fact, a civil engineer. And he asked the question, which I think is something we may need to answer in our journey to discover what we're going to do, is what is the idea of a university? He quoted Cardinal Newman in 1852 was the unfettered search for the truth. If you go back into universities, they only looked at things like philosophy, theology, language, and history. Those are the kind of subjects looking for truth. And students learnt at the feet of the professor. And I think we heard about distance learning and all those other things that are going to change. And then we have, like Carl Jaspers in 1958, spoke about growth in technology demanding specialized professional disciplines, and that was the tension that was spoken about. Are we focusing on what is required for the profession, or are we going for truth and knowledge? And the world of work demanding university graduates, we heard about that. What I found was very interesting, in 1959, Carl Jaspers was talking about allowing women to study at universities. Now think about it now, that was 60 years ago. How long has it taken the academic community to embrace that? We mustn't get caught short that the world changes, the profession changes, and we lag with that type of lag. We can't survive with that. We need to think about it. So the question is, what do we see universities of today? And I'm not going to try and answer it. I'll just take some of the things that might jog some thinking. Is if we look at it, are we talking about academic freedom, institutional autonomy? Is that the focus of the university? Are we trying to engage students and academics in the world of ideas and expanding, not necessarily professions, ideas? What are the three pillars? Is it teaching, research, community engagement? Or put another way, generation of knowledge, transmission of knowledge, and custodian of knowledge. Is it education different from skills? We need to answer that question. There is a relationship, but where is the emphasis? We've also got to think about the university as a class clearinghouse, because, it was a privilege in the years gone by trying to bring in the rural, to bring in the whole community, to have the diversity of different peoples, different communities expressed through engineering. So we need to think through some of those kind of things at the same time. I think we've also got to start thinking seriously about what is a profession. One of the definitions I've come across is a profession is an occupation in which individual areas of intellectual skill based on an established body of knowledge and practice to provide a specialized service in a defined area. And there would be the exercising of independent judgment in accordance with code of ethics and in the public interest. So we've got to think about what is the established body of knowledge, what is the intellectual skills that are required. And I think that we have in most parts of the world, we have the engineering qualifications and professional registrations are all broken down into three generic tracks: engineer, engineering technologist, engineering technician. Now, I might say one or two controversial things here, but in my experience, most engineers actually operate at a technologist level. No matter how much we say that they are the leader group, there are a small group of leaders, and not necessarily all it is one is a more theoretical, one is more a practical route to arrive at the same end. Now, I'll take you through a slightly different view, which I came across a number of years ago, and it really made a lot more sense. Duke's University classified people into two categories. One is the dynamic engineer, and the other is the transactional engineer. They said the dynamic engineer are those who are capable of abstract thinking, solving high-level problems, using scientific knowledge, thriving in teams, working well across international borders, have strong interpersonal skills, and are capable of leading innovation. Those are the few in the profession. You need them to lead the profession, but you need those that are capable of being the transactional, doing the day-to-day work. And although they may possess engineering fundamentals, they're not seen to have the experience or expertise to apply this knowledge to complex problems. They are viewed as being largely responsible for rote and repetitive tasks in the workforce. And I think that what I found interesting is the key differentiator between these two groups. There's not hard and fast rules, but it is the quality of education. The higher the quality of education, the higher probability of arriving at a dynamic engineer. And of course, we've got to think our engineering community needs both of those to function effectively. We can't have everybody that's dynamic, and we can't have everybody that is transactional. Let's have a look at some of these things, and I'm going to just touch upon them very, very slightly, because I do want to rather get to the points I want to make. But I think it's important to understand as we go through the journey of what is going to change, what will change. Some of the things that come out is we have systems integration. Engineers are going to have to take a far more, a broader role and strategic role in driving integration and collaboration with other professions. It's no longer we build a road from A to B. There are so many professions that we need to work with, and we need to find out how to engage them rather than being, I'm a technical person, I will sit and do the technical stuff. It's far broader than that today. We need to collaborate with them. What about the data? We're going into a digital age where data will give us greater insight into design and construction, and hence the need for more data and tech-driven solutions. So we're going to have a lot more greater collaboration across the built environment, as well as technical expertise, to get the best value out of the data and analysis that we're going to have. This is obviously going to impact upon the educational system, which is going to move beyond the teaching of skills that will in many cases be replaced by automation. We've got to think about how we're going to integrate the digital and artistic skills to enhance collaboration and creativity. Some of the other things that are coming in is with nanomaterials and nanotechnology and new materials. We're going to see all sorts of developments of new materials that have been used as we move forward. A lot of this will be driven by sustainability considerations. And there's going to be a need for far more research and development to apply solutions. And we need to collaborate more closely with scientists and other built environment professions. There's also the threat or opportunity, depending upon which way you want to look at it, of artificial intelligence that starts coming in. And this will have a huge impact, particularly on the design processes. I'm not so sure about taking decisions on sites. I'm sure that we can't get algorithms to mimic the decisions that need to be taken. But I think we've got to be very cognizant of it, that a lot of the calculation and stuff that we've got can be put into artificial intelligence. So what it's going to mean is a different skill set of how do you interpret the outputs of that. And so that is going to impact on the educational system to grasp the opportunities and prepare the workforce for changing demands and challenges. We've been an industry in the construction world that's been a bit behind in terms of we've been static for many years in the way we've delivered, the way we've done things, and around the corner there may well be some significant changes. We've also got the designing with data. We can have greater availability of data. If you think about it, years ago, I was thinking about it this morning over breakfast, where we started off, those of the older generation, with your instruments. You had to survey everything to put in all the lines, all the levels. You fly that digitally. It's all done digitally throughout the design office, all the way the drawings are prepared without touching pen and paper. We have changed. So we've got to have people that are going to have to move away from the traditional role of the engineer with a far, far broader skill set. And once again, our curriculum need to address this. We're also going to have new construction methods, particularly with robotics and all the rest of it. I know this is coming from the industrialized world, but we've got to prepare ourselves, because what happens when we do, and I'm very pleased to hear localization was spoken about this morning, because what happens with artificial intelligence, robotics, all the rest of it, what about the people? We're a creator of employment. And so we've got to figure this out, how we're going to embrace all of that. So we need to have new roles, greater collaboration between contractors and designers, and many things are going to change as we go through. We spoke about some of the resilience things this morning. I heard a lot about resilience, because we've got to prepare for extreme events. The populations have increased to such an extent that if we have something, an earthquake or whatever it might be, it was low impact in the years gone by, it's become high impact, and how do we bounce back from that? So the educational system needs to teach us the agility to address these issues as they come along. It's not classical engineering or business as usual. If I then move away to, if I then move on to some of the other issues, I've always thought about sustainable development, and if you look at it from the developed country perspective, it's all driven by affluence and overconsumption. If we look into the developing countries where we are in Africa, we've got poverty and underdevelopment to address. It's two different sides of it. We can't just adopt what the US has done and what other countries have done. I always remember that Gandhi said that poverty is the biggest polluter. We've got to address that through all our solutions to address some of the other things. So we have a Brown agenda where we've got to look at human well-being, low-income groups. How do we provide more? So all of those challenges are with us, and our educational system needs to bring that together as well. One of the other things is I've been a firm believer about appropriate technology. I think what we've got to do is, from the developed countries, learn what they've done and translate it into our local practice. Let me give you my favorite example. What happened is, a number of years ago in South Africa, the Pilanesberg Game Reserve wanted a Boekabong Dam. Now what they wanted, this was a massive game lodge going to look across a dam wall. They didn't want to see concrete. So the designers said, well, let's go to Zimbabwe, let's look what they do, and they've done lots and lots of rubble masonry dams. But they're all gravity dams. They used finite element techniques, all the latest structural design, and created arch dams out of rubble masonry. It generated huge amounts of employment, and guess what? To a height of 25 meters in height, it was 30% cheaper than roller compacted concrete. Now those are the kind of solutions we've got to do. Apply cutting edge technology. We've got to get our people to do things. Not like someone said to me years ago when they came across a program where I'd been involving communities in constructing their own infrastructure, and I met this person 30 years later from Zambia, and he said, 20 years later at least, he said, Ron, I studied box girder analysis at Imperial College. I'm very pleased to say last year we built our first box girder bridge, and I wasn't involved. But I learned about communities, and for the last 20 years, I've been engaging them in construction. Those are the kind of messages we've got to get across, the correct and alternative technologies. What was amazing about this is we published an article, and we got from World Vision in Afghanistan to say there were no dams. There were only 2 dams in the whole of Afghanistan a couple of years ago, because concrete dams are very expensive in these remote areas. The technology was imported, and they even set it up at the universities to teach the design of it, and created a whole industry that's sustainable using appropriate technologies. Our systems need to generate that and inculcate that. What about delivering projects? We've also got to rethink the way we deliver projects. How do we procure? How do we manage projects? Well, how do we deal with contractual risks? Because the contractual risks have increased dramatically. We have communities, we have stakeholders, we have everybody to manage in the process. So, and we're now also looking at trying to involve local resources. We need to start thinking about those things in the process. So let me try and wrap up to try and conclude of the observations that I make, and I believe that what I would like to see as the process of an educational perspective. I think we need to rethink the education of engineers to prepare them for a changing future role, and what should be the skills and competencies of the future graduate. And I believe that there's a role of institutions of higher learning, because I think that the role of them should be to teach what industry cannot. You see, there's a debate that goes on about train a person to be ready for industry. Is that the transactional, or is that the dynamic engineer? If you're going to train the dynamic engineer, you've got to teach what industry cannot. And what are those things? How to solve problems. What questions should be asked and answered. Prepare students for an agile workplace. How to work collaboratively. To give you an example, I went to a university that educated me. When I arrived in a design office to do structural design, I was intimidated by others who'd gone to universities and been taught the codes. We'd been introduced to the codes, but not taught the codes. A year later, when I'd had the opportunity to practice and play with the codes, we suddenly discovered we'd been taught the thinking behind the code, that when a problem occurred, you could solve it. So I think we've got to think differently. It's not about learning the technology, it's about how to think behind the technology and solve problems. We also need to educate the next generation of engineers so they can join the dots between disciplines and professions, to get that broad perspective, to learn what questions, how things interrelate with each other. That's the agile future that we've got to have. And I realize, look, we need to cater for both transactional and dynamic engineer. And so perhaps we've also got to have our institutions of higher learning having an apprentice type program where those that want to do the transactional is far more linked to industry to develop what is in fact needed. And I think maybe we've got to think about different streams. If I looked at the role of learned societies, I believe that the role of the learned societies is going to broaden the thinking and culture of the industry through CPD, through conferences, through diplomas, all sorts of things, is to try and broaden the horizon. Let the universities provide the basics. If you need an in-depth specialization or something like that, would come through from the institutions or learned societies. To facilitate postgraduate skills for the workplace, focusing on critical practice areas not addressed in depth, because you can't cram everything into the programs. You're absolutely right. Program management, all of that stuff, let it be done as part of the CPD and the lifetime or initial professional development. And I think the institutions have a phenomenal role to play and to link up with the academic institutions to fill in the practice gaps. And that would certainly be like procurement and delivery management would be better outside than inside the university. We also need to broaden the skill sets of those working in the workplace to embrace change, innovation, integration, and collaborative working. We need to promote the apprentice-type degree programs, and we also need to develop communication skills. You spoke about the soft skills. Isn't engineering all about communication? It's all about information flow from one to the next, down the chain. Think about it. With your planning, designing, constructing, it's a flow of information. We have to communicate, yet we're not taught these skills. There is also an increasing need, so we need to cater for all of that. And finally, I think we need to look at the research perspective from a fresh point of view. We have too much research for the sake of research. And what I would like to suggest is that we need to build greater links between research and practice and make the environment a living laboratory where we have a partnership between the two. What I'd like to see is a focus on research which enables informed, evidence-based choices to be made. So if you're going to do a research project, think about someone who's going to make a decision to embrace that technology or not. That's what it's all about, trying to communicate those things outwards. We also need to have research should be aimed at addressing practical problems and questions that engineering professionals encounter in practicing their profession. The university that I went to set up a policy many years ago where the head of department encouraged the lecturers to go and work with consultants. Let consultants bring their problems to them. They'd have more than enough information and topics to do phenomenal research that is relevant because industry would bring their problems to them. And it worked incredibly well. I think there's also the research about publishing case studies to highlight practices adopted on a project which, if adopted by others, would assist and improve. We saw this at the conference here. There were a lot of showcasing of innovation. Sometimes all it is a brochure. And the problem is industry doesn't have time to write these things up. Academics are far, far better at it, and researchers. Get researchers to write up case studies, to spread ideas. Someone looks at it and says, wow, that's a wonderful idea. I could implement it over here, and it can change things. So we increasingly need to convert new ideas into standard practices, and perhaps that should be the focus of research. I think I've said enough. And what I would like to just say is that I fully agree that this, with some of the previous speakers, that what we're talking about here is just, if I get back to this, well, it's gone, but what I wanted to just say, sorry, I just wanted to end off on that many conversations and hard decisions will be required to map out the way forward. There is no silver bullet. It's going to be hard discussions because we can't see into the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ron. And I'm sure all of us will be prepared for those hard conversations. Thank you. The next presenter is Professor, it should have been Professor Kuma. His representative is here. So let's put our hands together. Professor Kuma is the Vice Chancellor of the University of Mines and Technology in Takwa, and is represented by Professor Teming.
Thank you. So as you can see, Professor Kuma is my lead co-author of this presentation. Let me associate myself with all the protocol lists already acknowledged. But I will address the chairman of the session. Mr. Chairman, I will present on the same topic, harmonizing, as others have already done. But my focus will be on trying to look at what has been done in other parts of the world. Also look at what has been done in Africa, parts of Africa, in terms of harmonization, what we can learn from this going forward. Advances in technology, especially in ICT, has increased the need for acceleration in globalization. And as a result of this, normally economic blocks are created, and some of these blocks are either at the continental level or regional level. And we have examples of EU, AU. We have in West Africa, in Africa, we have ECOWAS, we have the East Africa Community, and we have Southern African Development Community. Normally, these blocks, economic blocks, are established by treaties and agreements. And as part of these agreements, we have cultural and educational aspects that allow exchange and collaboration in these areas. When it comes to education, there are a number of mutual recognition agreements that recognize programs of study in various jurisdictions within a block, such that qualifications or degrees earned in another country can be recognized in another country within the block. An example is the Bologna Accord, which was established in 1999 between 29 EU states, and the purpose was to ensure compatibility in the standards and quality of higher education qualifications, which gave rise to the European higher education area. The Bologna Accord has grown into 47 countries as at 2010, when the Budapest Declaration was made. In 2007, the harmonization of higher education programs in Africa, supported by the EU was taken as an initiative of the African Union. And in 2012, the EU supported the AU to begin a program called African Higher Education Harmonization and Tuning Project. I think this was alluded to by one of the presenters. And this was to facilitate the AU initiative. The AU launched the Harmonization of African Higher Education Quality Assurance and Accreditation Initiative called HACA, if I can call it that way, supported by the EU. The HACA project was to support development of a harmonized quality assurance and accreditation system at institutional, national, regional, and pan-African continental level. Out of these, 3 documents were produced. The first one is the existing standards and guidelines in quality assurance of African countries, and then the African Quality Rating Mechanism, which is AQRM, I think Prof. Sawyer mentioned it, Consolidated Evaluation Report. And then we also had the African Standards and Guidelines for Quality Assurance. All these towards trying to harmonize and make engineers or engineering graduates have some mobility within the continent. And to this end, 3 training programs were organized with the common language for higher education in Africa. Ghana participated in all the 3 programs. And in the case of the AQRM, 15 universities across Africa participated, with 3 from West Africa, Nigeria, Ghana, and Burkina Faso. The HACA project had 60 universities with 5 subject groups: medicine, teacher education, civil engineering, mechanical engineering, and agriculture. And each was represented in 2 countries. Then in East Africa, by the East African Community, they are developing a model to harmonize their higher education programs to facilitate comparability, compatibility, mutual recognition of higher education and training systems, and the qualifications attained among the East African Community partners. And this is based on a shared view in quality, criteria, standards, and learning outcomes. It should be recognized that harmonization is also promoting competitiveness, uniqueness, and innovativeness among higher educational institutions and countries, while at the same time benchmarking their systems and programs to the basic regional standards and guidelines. In West Africa, 8 Francophone countries under the West African Economic and Monetary Union, I think the French acronym is UMOA, are working together to harmonize their higher education programs. And this is aimed at promoting a sub-regional system open to the world, developing joint mechanisms to promote quality and ensure international recognition of degrees. The UMOA has also committed to establish mechanisms to assess quality of programs at the national level, and also a regional mechanism for monitoring and sharing best practices. So if we look closely, we can see that the Anglophone, the Francophone West Africa have made more efforts in terms of harmonization compared to the Anglophone West African countries in terms of engineering. Engineering education, defined by ABET, Accreditation Board for Engineering and Technology, that is the American body for accreditation of engineering programs, as the profession in which knowledge of mathematical and natural sciences gained by study, experience, and practice is applied with judgment to develop ways to utilize economically the materials and forces of nature for the benefit of mankind. And I think from this definition, we can see that the provision of commodities, goods, and services, as well as structures, normally the professional, the engineering professional is at the center of this, as well as engineering enterprises. Therefore, the quality of engineering professional practice and education is an essential facilitator for global practice. The accreditation of engineering education programs as an engineering route to the engineering profession has proved to be a powerful tool to improve both academic and quality relevance to the job market. And in Europe, accreditation of graduate engineers started in 1934 with the title Engineer Diploma, if their programs of study received accreditation by the Commission d'études d'Ingénieurs, CTI. And through the Bologna process, European countries are now harmonizing their engineering programs with European Accredited Engineer Project, EUACE. The EUACE is run by the European Network for Accreditation of Engineering Education. In the US, the Engineers Council for Professional Development, ECPD, established in 1932 for accreditation of engineering programs, changed its name to ABET, as I've already mentioned, in 1980, just to reflect the emphasis they place on their core function of accreditation. There are also some international agreements for mutual recognition of engineering degrees. For example, the International Engineering Alliance. And under this, there are a number of accords. The Washington Accord, which was established in 1989 by about 20 countries across the world, different continents, recognizing engineering degrees across continents. And then we have the Sydney Accord and the Dublin Accord, which focused more on engineering technicians. Outcome-based accreditation. The EUACE framework recommends outcome-based program accreditation of engineering education. And here, the essence here is that the outcome-based engineering accreditation focused more on the learning outcomes rather than what the student is taught. And so it gives the opportunity for both the higher education institution and where the engineering graduate is to be employed, the employer, to assess and find out the qualities and the abilities of the engineering graduate. The engineering-based, the outcome-based accreditation was started by ABET in 1997, at the time using the engineering criteria 2000. And according to ABET, to be considered for accreditation, engineering programs must prepare graduates for the practice of engineering at a professional level. This outcome-based accreditation actually recognizes CPD, continuous professional development. There's emphasis on that. The accreditation system by ABET is a voluntary system, and it assures that graduates of an accredited program are prepared adequately to enter and continue the practice of engineering. It also stimulates the improvement of engineering education, encourages new and innovative approaches to engineering education, and identifies these programs to the public. The outcome-based accreditation approach has 4 advantages, and these are: it respects the many existing traditions and methods of engineering education in Europe. So, in essence, it is not trying to force a certain system on every institution or every country, but the fact that we are looking at the outcomes, it allows individual differences, but it's able to measure from what is learned rather than what is taught. It can also accommodate developments and innovations in teaching methods. And it also encourages the sharing of good practice among the different traditions and methods. And it can accommodate the development of new branches of engineering. The EuroAce also practices this outcome-based accreditation, and it distinguishes the difference that is distinguished between the different levels or cycles of engineering. First cycle or second cycle. First cycle, the bachelor; second cycle, the master's, and then we have the tertiary. With the first cycle, there are 21 outputs that are identified, and with the second cycle, there are 23 outputs under 6 headings. The knowledge and understanding, these are what are actually assessed during accreditation. Engineering analysis, engineering design, investigations, engineering practice, and transferable skills. In these outcome-based programs, the engineering professional is looked at in 2 different perspectives. The first one is the training at the university level. That is where the knowledge intensive training is given. That is at the higher educational level. And then the training on the job, where the engineer goes under the supervision of maybe a more experienced engineer, and then after some time, he can practice independently. So if you look at the Rahan model, it looks at these 3 aspects: the academic education, the training experience, that is the young engineer after graduation going under the supervision of a more experienced person, and then the independent practice after the experience is gained, and therefore the engineer can practice on his own under some codes of practice: the code of conduct, the general regulation, the specific regulation in the person's area of specialization, peer regulation, and then continuing professional development. The current state of affairs at the Anglophone West African countries. I think when I was given initially the efforts that have been made, we saw there was the UMOA, which is the Francophone West African, 8 countries making the effort and committing to trying to recognize programs across the sub-region. And the English speaking West Africa, the efforts have been made, but not maybe to the level of harmonizing yet. We took a quick scan at the current situations in the Anglophone West African countries in terms of some universities running engineering programs. We looked at Ghana, Nigeria, Sierra Leone, and Liberia. And in terms of the kinds of programs, we have a range of programs running, both the traditional and the non-traditional engineering programs. We also identified that BSc programs in Ghana run for 4 years, engineering, and in Nigeria is 5 years. I think this is just highlighting the differences across countries, but at the same time telling us to not to make the countries the same, but to appreciate the differences. So if we are harmonizing, let's acknowledge that every university may be unique, but we should have a system that will be able to recognize what kind of engineering graduate is being produced by any institution, no matter the kind of system in place. We also looked at the entry requirements. Ghana, we realized, we looked at 2 universities running engineering programs, University of Mines and Technology, Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology, and the entry requirements are virtually the same. Nigeria, we looked at 3 universities, University of Port Harcourt, University of Lagos, and the University of Technology, Akure. And we saw that the University of Lagos and University of Technology are the same, while the University of Port Harcourt is a bit different. We also saw between Ghana and Nigeria, it appears there's more emphasis in Ghana on mathematics. So you will see there's the core maths and elective maths. And if you see in Nigeria, it's mathematics. But I think they cater for the mathematics, that's why they are doing 5 years, probably the first year of the engineering program. And then we also see that there's an additional examining body, the NECO, apart from the WAEC we all know of. Then Sierra Leone is a bit different. The other thing is that Ghana has 6 credit passes, Sierra Leone, Nigeria has 5, just as Sierra Leone, and Liberia sees a high school diploma. It wasn't clear the number of passes. But you can see that with Sierra Leone now, they are not just credit passes, but it should be at least C5. So they won't recognize C6. In terms of accreditation, all the universities have accreditation units in place. And in Ghana, as we are aware, the National Accreditation Board is in charge. Nigeria, National Universities Commission. And then the 2 are the ministries of education, Sierra Leone and Liberia. In terms of quality assurance is also a key element when we are looking at harmonizing. But we saw, apart from probably Liberia, we were not too sure. We couldn't see anything with respect to quality assurance. the others all have quality assurance systems in place to ensure that the programs go according to good standards of quality. Now, in terms of higher education institutions in the Anglophone West Africa, a number of initiatives have been taken to improve quality of higher education programs, though not directly in harmonization, but it is connected. It is the beginning. So these are all efforts towards harmonization. For instance, in 2004 to 2009, there was this TALIF, Teaching and Learning Innovative Fund. I think this was a World Bank project, and it was the World Bank supported the government of Ghana. The main aim here was to equip institutions in terms of resources for them to be able to perform better. And then there was this DICE program funded by DAD and then the German Rectors Conference. And here it was an internal quality assurance initiative which supported the building of capacity of members from various universities. They were supposed to be trained and then go and multiply, just train others. So a number of representatives from various universities went to be trained in Germany, and they came and organized workshops. So this was the effort. There's also this 21 African Higher Education Centers of Excellence project, which is also sponsored by the World Bank. Also, this was actually to select various universities as centers of excellence to develop PhD programs where they would train Africans in certain areas to improve. So, though these initiatives are not directly aimed at harmonization, as I said earlier, they are just efforts at trying to build the background so that when we are in the position to harmonize, we'll be able to forge ahead better. In conclusion, we will say that we cannot claim to have gotten all the efforts that have been made towards harmonization. But we can say that serious efforts have been made by Anglophone higher education institutions to strengthen quality assurance and related issues in order to improve the quality of teaching and learning environment. And some countries, including Ghana, have empowered their national accreditation institutions in an effort to regulate and enforce quality of higher education programs. Our view is that governments of Anglophone West African countries need to coordinate and do more to bring together their national accreditation institutions to agree to harmonize all higher education programs, including engineering programs. And we can learn from global practice. Globally, regional blocks have been instituted to harmonize engineering programs. Anglophone West Africa needs to study best practices and then place them in the sub-regional context, but giving space for innovation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Timming, sorry. I had a senior in school called Tinkrang. That may be the reason. The next speaker is a Ghanaian who's credited with setting up the Faculty of Engineering at Ashesi University, but is now running the academic city in Accra. I have the privilege to invite my good friend, Professor Fred Magbon-Luri. Please, let's give him a round of applause.
Thank you. You're so kind. Mr. Chairman, all protocols observed. Okay. So I guess in my excitement, all right, thank you all. If this were my class, I'll give you a 5 minutes bio break because I know you must be tired. All right, I hear no from the exec, so I'm going to continue. But I'm going to make it as spirited as possible, so you're not going to get bored, okay? All right, so thank you, Mr. Executive Secretary. I appreciate your very kind words. After listening to Dr. Walter Myers' presentation, I thought maybe I should just go home. And it was also quite comforting to hear Professor Sawyer define what he meant by harmonization, because I've been having nightmares about it. I feel like it's another ICC or the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Agreement that we are signing on before we actually know what to do with it. Okay. So anyway, I thought what I would do here is to come at this more from a practitioner and an academic perspective. So I spent 16 years hiring undergrads, masters, PhD holders. And then I had the privilege of getting into the classroom. So what I'm going to share with you today is that bridge between academia and industry and what the future is looking for. So if you look at our kids today, can you see that? So that is me over there with students when I was at Ashesi University. And that is me when I was much younger, receiving an award. And I put this slide here for a reason. And the reason is also around harmonization. Because when I got government scholarship to go to the US, I was a biology student. So if I hadn't gone to the US, I would not be an engineer because I was a biology student. So I think we are overemphasizing requirements into engineering programs. And when you take 14-year-old kids or 12-year-old kids who are making a decision about the future, and when they are 18, you tell them, that's it. The decision you made when you were 12, when you are 60, it will be a millstone around your neck. Biology students can be good engineers, okay? And just because the public universities get too many graduates are trying to get into college and they use mathematics as a filter, it doesn't mean those that do not have further math or additional math cannot do engineering. And that ought to be changed if we want to move forward as a country, okay? So what I'm going to do is take you through two things. How we design the curriculum of the future and how we deploy it. Our children are more intelligent than we are. This generation is hungry, excited. They want to touch stuff. They want to build stuff. They want to break stuff. And yet, we are so worried about them. We keep saying, oh, they spend too much time on the phone, on the computer, they play video games. And yet, when you buy your smartphones and you can't use them, you go to them. I told you it was going to be spirited, right? Now, those of you who are sleeping, I have a quiz for you because you need to be up, okay? So here's where the world is going. The world is talking about Hyperloop, maglev trains, 3D printing, flying whales. And here is David. You know David from the Bible? The guy that used to sing songs for God. Now, this is what that sling looks like now. And you can ask Hezbollah how many of their missiles have been able to get through this shield. Okay? So I put this there to show you the world is moving. You see, David is up here with a sling, And this is what the sling is today. So we cannot afford to be held in suspended animation. We got to move, okay? So here's what we do at Academic City. All our curriculum is structured around these 4 pillars. When we say experiential, we are not making excuses for whether we have material equipment or not. The fan you see up there works. There's a motor in it, and it's made from cardboard. That's a bulldozer. This is a real-life bulldozer, and it's all made out of cardboard. So the kids are anxious to touch. They are anxious to experience. They are anxious to build things. You can't make excuses for that. The next thing we do is make sure it's contextual. And what do I mean by contextual? It's an African problem. We have enough trash in Kokrobite, okay? We have energy problems. So I'm sure Dr. Boachi remembers when I invited him to a panel discussion at my university for freshmen. And the intent was to bring all these experts from Ghana, retired, old, young, male, female, and have the students interview them about their careers, what they like, what they didn't like. And the outcome of that exercise was for them to write a reflection paper trying to answer what they didn't know going in and what they learned. And the second thing was for them to identify and vote on one local problem that they would like to solve. Freshmen, okay? At that time, Dunso was at its peak. And they decided to build portable solar generators, okay? So you can see our girls were very active. So these are conceptualized. First-year engineering students designed this in SolidWorks, and they built it. And the competition was, it has to charge your laptop, your phone, and switch on a light. Okay? Then we also focus on unified learning. What does that mean? We are training kids to go and work in the real world. In the real world, there is nothing like mechanical, electrical, computer, procurement, all the fancy things that we talk about when we are in academia. You need all these guys working together to get stuff done. So I have my students working on a project now, and they're whispering to each other. They're whispering to each other here. And they are working on a rover bin, a smart trash can. Not the ones you see in Accra that are overfilled and trash is falling out. This will be so smart that it's going to walk on each floor. You put trash in it, and when it's full, it will go somewhere, empty itself, and go wait. Now, we have marketing students on this project. We have finance students on this project. IT, computer science, mechanical, electrical. And so you ask me, what are they doing there? The marketing guys are figuring out how to tell that product story and sell it. The IT guys are going to figure out when you have 20 of these walking around campus like airplanes, how are you going to control them, okay? And can you even have an app that calls it when you need it instead of you going around looking for a trash can? The computer science guys, computer engineers, are trying to figure out what type of microprocessors to choose, program, and control it. The mechanical guys are trying to figure out what shape and form is going to optimize. And they will do these projects for 3 semesters, and we expect 20 prototypes and at least 2 of those going into the marketplace. That is entrepreneurship. We are not talking about it, we are trying to do it. Then the last pillar here is extensional learning. Now, when we talk about critical learning, we are trying to teach these kids to be able to take the knowledge that we provide them and extend that to things they've never seen before, okay? So when I was younger, and don't let my gray hair deceive you, I just cannot afford Yombo. You know, I worked on a technology that made hearing instruments. The same technology can make orthodontics. It can make surgical planning stuff, shoe lasts. So this basically says you can walk to a mall somewhere, put your foot on a machine, get it scanned, the next day you get your own custom shoe at home. But it's the same technology. It's 3 pieces of technology coming together to do that. Okay. So what you see here is a project that I worked on. And if you have hearing loss or have a parent that cannot hear, you understand this technology better. So the old technology was you walk into an audiologist's office and they'll create a mold of your ear and put it in the mail to a Siemens house somewhere. A technician, transactional or dynamic, depending on whose perspective, will cut it up nicely and use silicone to create a cure, to cure basically the shell. Put instruments in it, trim it out, and send it off. Okay. Now, we decided that we wanted to automate it. So the first step was, anytime you ship this, whether it's the winter or summer, the hearing instrument material shrinks. Okay? This bad boy here shrinks. Sorry. And when it shrinks, and you make an instrument out of it, it gets returned. So the return rate or rejection rate was 25%. So to go automation, you need to make sure that you take care of that problem up front. Okay? So we designed a scanner, and we send it to we design it first in-house, so when it comes, we would immediately scan it. But that did not solve the problem of the transactional time. Okay? So we had to move to the next step of actually taking this to the audiologist's office. So now they take the mold, they scan it, and electronically it comes to us. Then now we have a software. It's no longer manual like you saw before. Okay? Something is going on here. Okay. So what you saw here was all manual. Okay? Now, this process is all automated. Now, this is where unified learning comes into it. So, what degree do you get in the university that helps you do this? Okay? What university it is? Now, this whole technology that you just saw had a whole IT infrastructure. 3D scanning and printers and product-specific stuff, and need interfaces. So again, if you are not taught to think in a unified form, and you just walk into Siemens in 2001 and say, I'm just the scanner guy, none of what you saw before is going to happen. Okay? So here are the 3 technologies. When I started this project, this guy here was designed by Mitsubishi. And they actually designed a huge one to use to scan recruits for the US Army. So they will scan the recruit and make sure that the uniform fits to his body. And I went to them and said, can you miniaturize it so that I can scan something that looks like that? Okay? Then there's a 3D printer here that overheats, and so when it makes this object, it also shrinks. There was no software for this anywhere. We had to design this from the scratch because the human ear is organic. Okay? Now, why am I showing you these examples? This is the future technologies. And we need to train kids to think in a certain way to play in that field. We are still talking mechanical, civil, electrical, because that's what we know. Guys, the world has long moved away from these things. Okay? Now, what you also see here are technologies that could not have been developed if there wasn't 3D modeling software. Okay, let's keep going. Now, what you see here was what we used to do manually. The same person's ear. This is what we're able to do with technology. So the French person will say, I want this because I don't want anybody to know I'm wearing hearing instrument. Okay? So let's keep going. All these shapes couldn't have happened without technology. There's no way you could do this manually. So let's look at contextual. You saw a picture earlier where these kids were actually building portable solar generators. We make them work. When they complain about hard work, we tell them, your full-time job is to go to school. Shut up. Okay. So here is the guys building the rover. This is where we are today. The trash can keep filling up, and there's no sensor to say it's enough, go to the next one. We just fill it, and it sits there. And these kids are trying to change the dynamics. He's a computer science student, he's an IT student, and she's a mechanical engineering student. They are working together. That is real life. Okay? Curricular development. I'm going to be quick. I promise you, you will not be bored, okay? So, what is it? Oh, I have 2 A's. See what happens when Mr. Ajipon wants you to come and present. You know, what do we want our graduates to be able to do? And are the programs we are offering in line with our national aspirations? Our programs globally competitive? Are they unique? You know, we just don't have to have mechanical engineering the way it is at MIT. We don't. There's nothing that really says that. You need to have a mechanical engineering program that solves your problems. Okay? Are there synergies across? You need to figure it out, because if you don't, you'll be buying multiple equipment. Now, we also make sure that there is design thinking going into our curriculum. There is systems thinking in it, and there is social emotional intelligence. The previous speakers have all touched on it. Now, my favorite topic is systems thinking. And I usually define it simply as anytime you have a problem in human society that doesn't seem to have a solution, it's a systems problem. Corruption is a systems problem. Educational system is a systems problem. Educational harmonization is a systems problem. Even envy is a systems problem. And until you understand all the variables, everything that drives that state of affairs, you will not be able to solve it. You know, there's a famous story in Arizona where there was all of a sudden rabbit infestation everywhere. Rabbits eating produce from farms. And people got frustrated, so the US Rangers decided that they would go to Canada and import foxes. Foxes like rabbits. So they brought foxes in. In a few years, they ate all the rabbits, and then their population went up. They were eating other animals, so whoever made that decision didn't know that foxes ate more than rabbits. So they were eating other endangered species. So another bright guy said, let's just issue license to these hunters and let them shoot them. So they started issuing licenses to hunters, and then the animal rights guys woke up in arms. So you can't just do knee-jerk reaction types decisions. You need to understand the whole value stream. Okay? We think that a little bit of liberal arts core helps kids to read well, to write well, to present well, stable emotions, engage with the rest of the world. You should have something in your curriculum. We are training them to lead. Whether we realize that or not, in the next 50 years, none of us in this room will be alive. Sorry. I'm not a pastor, but we need to train the next generation. That is all I'm trying to say. Don't worry, you're not going to die. Sorry, I know Africans don't like funerals, but we make very good caskets. Let's give them a little bit of entrepreneurship experience. You know, I was in Kenya last week, and I went to Moi University, and they have revived an old textile company. And they are giving farmers climate-resistant seeds. They are buying their produce. They are making uniforms for Kenya Army and Kenya Police. They are not just talking about entrepreneurship. They are actually doing it in the university environment, and we need to do more of those. And then, of course, the area of harmonization is what does the major course look like? Okay. Here is a sketch of what mechanical engineering looks like at Worcester Polytechnic Institute. Ironically, my PhD professor is now the dean. Actually, he is the provost. That's a framework. When you talk about harmonization, this is what I'm looking at. I'm not looking at you to come and tell me how many design courses I should have. I'm looking at you to tell me that when I get a kid from Ghana with a mechanical engineering degree and he comes to Liberia, in each of these categories he has taken a course. Now, if you start telling me what course it is specifically, that's civil war. Because if all the universities are taking the same courses, as a private university, why would somebody pay $7,000 to come to my university versus your university? I need to have a value proposition, and I need the freedom to decide whether under aerospace I'm doing biofluids, rehabilitation, biomechanics, engineering mechanics. That is academic freedom. If you prescribe this up to the specificity, then that is no longer higher education. Okay? Here's another one from Worcester Polytechnic. Now, what you can see here is you have specialization. You can do electrical and electronics and specialize in biomedical. You can specialize in communications, analog systems, and microwaves. The kids are asking for that. Anytime I go to schools, the kids say, do you offer aerospace engineering? And then I said, yes and no. The no part is I don't have a major called aerospace. But if you want to be an aerospace engineer, you can do mechanical, electrical, computer engineering, or even civil engineering. And they don't know that. Right? We box them in, guys. Knowledge is not, it's a continuum. It's not discrete. Okay? So curricular deployment. And I know you are tired. I'll wrap this. I'll make it painless. Okay? Now, we as academics, we have to decide whether we are teaching humans or donkeys. Yeah, trust me. Do you take responsibility for outcomes? So at the end of every semester, I ran a survey on all my faculty members. Feedback from students. Those are my customers. Are they happy? Now, students are the most difficult customers you can have, especially if you give them an opportunity to critique. You know, and in one of my own feedbacks, after teaching a class, everything looked good until I got to a point where one student said, anytime he teaches introduction to engineering, he uses his own products for demonstration. When did that become a problem? So I came to the class and I made light of it. I said, guys, you know why I do that? For two reasons. The first reason is, if I did it and I did not have the opportunities that you have today, I want you to do it better. The second thing is that I came from Siemens. Becton and Dickinson, the products that we built were unique. The university doesn't even have the money to buy them. These are samples that I brought with me, so you should appreciate me, okay? Now, are you educating doers or observers? And then my famous one is, can your C students deliver as well as somebody else's A students? That's a fundamental question. And the students will say, Dr. Fred, you always say C's are not a problem. But anytime we go looking for a job, nobody likes C's. I said, it's not because nobody likes C's. You just don't know how to interview. He said, what do you mean? I said, when you walk in, the first thing you tell the person is, as you can see, my grades are C's, but they don't reflect my performance. If you give me this opportunity, I will surprise you. You see, I'm head of my basketball team, the debating club. I've done 4 projects on agri-innovation software for farmers. List your strengths. List your strengths. It's critical. You know, I know some A students that I will never hire. When I used to hire, you sit across from me, and I look at your skills, where you've worked, and I look at the project that I have, and then when I'm done, I say, which school did they go to? Community college. You are in. People respect you for your ability to work with others and for the skills that you bring. Grades are overemphasized. Okay? Now, do you really teach critical thinking skills? Are your lessons systemic, entrepreneurial? Are your students on a roadmap to success, or are they grouping in the dark? So here's my favorite slide. If you want to teach somebody how to play a violin or a piano, do you just tell them a story about pianos and violins? Are they going to learn how to play violins that way? Will it make a difference if you put one in their hands? Will it make a difference if they know the parts, the different parts of it? Is that how we are teaching today? We have to stop telling stories. Remember the cardboards? Let them cut the cardboards if you can't afford anything else. Cut the cardboard, feel it, experience it. That's the only way you can learn. So here's one of my favorite slides, and we are almost at the end, so this will be as painless as it gets. So a female student calls me one time. I was then at Ashasi, and she said, Dr. Fred, I don't really know how to break this news to you, but that physics you are teaching is not sinking. And it was a WhatsApp message. And I had just returned from the US, and you know when your baggage is the last one to come out, it's 1 a.m., right? And she apologized nicely. She said, I hope you don't see this tonight, but I didn't want to forget. So I got up and I said, thank you very much for the message. Why don't you stop by my office tomorrow morning and we'll have a conversation? So I got up and I was thinking, I said, hey, this transition from industry to academia is becoming painful, you know? So I asked myself, I was honest with myself. I said, if I were a student in my class and I'm being taught by me the way that I was teaching, will I understand me? So I'm flipping it around. Instead of telling her, you guys are so lazy, you don't study anymore, I'm asking the question, is it from me or is it from her? So I started sketching these boxes. And I remembered when I was in college, somebody walks in and says, displacement, velocity, acceleration, if you differentiate down the line. And if you go back in the other direction, it's called integration. That's why you are learning all that calculus stuff. So I just started sketching these boxes, and I'm sitting down there saying, okay, you know, after measurements in a typical mechanics book, you go to kinematics. Movement, things are moving, but nobody knows what is causing them. Nobody is interested yet what is getting them to move. So then I try to explain velocity, the difference between that and speed to myself, because sometimes we know these things, but translating it to students is a challenge, you know. And so I created this. I said, okay, if you start off with velocity, an object moves over a certain period of time in a certain direction at a certain speed. And then I went up, but what I did here was from that point here where you have displacement all the way to acceleration, that's kinematics. Then you start getting to forces, which is dynamics, like what is making this object move. And once you have force and acceleration, you're looking at Newton's second law. Okay? Now here's displacement, here is force. Force in the same direction, if you displace an object over a certain distance in the direction of the force, you're talking about energy here, work. And then I sketched this nicely for her. And then I said, well, this is in the linear reference frame. If you go into the nonlinear reference space, everything becomes angular this, angular that, you know, angular acceleration, angular velocity, displacement, but then your force becomes torque. Conservation of energy still holds. Okay. So anyway, I'm not going to bore you with the details of it. I'm going to move to the next slide. But the point I'm trying to make is, how do we teach these guys with a certain level of compassion? Okay? A certain level of compassion. We can't build a future angry. Okay? With our kids. Okay? Now, this is another course that I teach. So what I was humble enough to learn from the young woman was that just because I know it doesn't mean that everybody else knows it the way that I do. So every course that I teach, I sketch a one-pager, and it's my roadmap. And every single day when I walk into the class to teach a chapter, I project this first. So this is strength of materials. You apply a force on an object, you stress it, or strain it. And these are the different stress states in your book. They call them chapters. Okay? And you need yes, that's what they do. They call them chapters. But I tell you one secret that I found out. Books are written by academics. When you come at it from the practitioner's perspective, you realize quickly that you don't have to teach chapter 1 followed by chapter 2. Sometimes you teach chapter 3 and go to 12 and 13 and then come back. Okay? Now, what do I expect the kids to learn from this when you apply? And these are the different types of geometry that you apply forces on. So here you go. You got beams here, right, in these rooms. Beams, okay? And you have columns here. So I will tell my students to take a camera and go outside. So here's one of the challenges I have with accreditation panels. When they come, they look at the syllabus and say, are you sure you can finish this in 1 year? In our school, we do it in are you sure you can do this in 1 semester? Because in our school, we do it in 2 semesters. And I say, yes, I can do that. Because my students are not donkeys. And I'll tell you why I can do that. When I'm teaching beams, they go out there and take pictures of beams. When I'm teaching columns, so I divide the course among 12 groups. There are 12 chapters in strength of materials. Okay? This group is doing beams. Another group is doing columns, buckling. And I spread it out. And then they come and they present. They present on beams and derive the formulas. And when they go wrong, I correct them. And once they are done doing the analytics, I help them do the modeling. And so if you go back to this slide here, I said at the end of this course, you will know how to do analytics, you will know how to do experiments, and you know how to do simulation. And these 3 is what is going to get you a job. Because for an engineer, strength of material is like the stethoscope around a doctor's neck. So let's go. Quick. So here is a typical textbook, okay? It's a textbook for strength of materials. You can start off, these are the first 2 chapters. You can teach them. And you see all these guys in this color, you can teach them. But this is like chapter 11 and chapter 12. Once you cover this, you can go to those chapters and finish it up. Okay? And then you come back and you're like, okay, once I have these guys also I can go. This is like the last chapter. Now, if you treat this, you know enough of this. So if you're running out of time and you don't even cover this, you've already covered how to derive moments in here. And then you cover some of this here. Okay, you can actually cover this and that together. So you don't have to follow chapter after chapter like we are programmed, you know. I'm going to jump this. Okay. So this will be my last slide, I promise. So everything you've heard from me so far converges here. We need to develop skills. Now, somebody says they have to go out there and practice. We don't really have that many industries. If you were to send all the engineering students we have today into corporate Ghana looking for internships, there will not be enough for everybody. So we also have to find opportunities within the curriculum to help them develop some of those skills. Now, let me sound, we're not going anywhere if our educational system cannot produce these skills, okay? We're not going anywhere. Software. We need to develop strong software capabilities. We need to develop microprocessors, microcontrollers capabilities. Materials. We are endowed with rich materials. We have to be able to build alloys and super alloys. Digital manufacturing, I showed it earlier. We can use that to leapfrog. My team showed Siemens Energy how to build aircraft discs from 3D printers. Okay, and I think this is physical metallurgy. So there are a set of skills that somehow, without those, our industrial basis will be missing, and our education will not be producing what we need to sustain the industries that we anticipate. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Fred. I think this is a very elaborate state-of-the-art presentation. That's why we need a new engineer, the Renaissance engineer. Move away from the old modes and embrace the new for the future generations. Our last presenter, well, that's not a presentation, but the president of the African Federation would just give us the perspective. We've had different topics from different parts of Africa, and we need Martin to just fuse it all together, and we hope our brother for Zimbabwe would make it as brief as possible. The president of the Federation of African Engineering Organizations, Martin.
Thank you very much. I think this was a long day. What I just want to summarize is engineering education is core to the Federation's strategies. And we have heard just a symbol. I'm not going to, I'll leave just a vision. As FAO, we believe in engineering, high engineering standards. And as such, our dream is to ensure that we have the right professional corps to deliver these services. I have heard from the presenters of several accreditation bodies. The World Federation of Engineers and FAO have decided that we will use the International Engineering Alliance accreditation. Why? Because it's global, it touches many contexts, and it is worldwide. You would find Abet, highly explained here, is also a member of the EIA, and as such, we believe in one standard. There is no lower standard for any country. No one should cheat us that we can lower the standard and accredit you. We would like all African countries or all those universities that are ready to be accredited to the Washington Accord level and to the Dublin Accord level and to the Sydney if they are technologists. So that has been determined, and we have a policy to that effect. As such, I think we are going to work through our agreement with the African Union such that we will establish an accreditation body that is aligned to FAO, that works through the regions. And congratulations to WAFIO for this initiative, because we were going to, I think, Mr. President, you need to stand up and we acclaim your initiative. So what we are going to do is we would like the academic presentations here. We are not standardizing. We are not standardizing. It's a no, no, no. We are harmonizing such that we are setting a minimum body of knowledge for a particular context and subject. Learning has now moved from content to context. And as such, as engineering, there will be the competence specs or outcomes or the engineering spec, like the Euro S that has been defined. We are going to have the Africa Engineer card, Africa Engineering card. And that card will have the competencies equivalent to the Washington Accord, Dublin Accord, or Sydney Accord under the Engineering Alliance. So that's basically our policy. And as such, all the regions of FAO, the NAFIO, WAFIO, SAFIO, East Africa, and the Central Africa will work towards regional, the regional context. We are talking here minimum standards for education and training, or a body of knowledge, and then we will set up the accreditation system. Basically, the general Washington Accord, Bologna, and all those accords, they use this definition where the dynamic engineer is towards the end, is conceptual, can conceive designs, and then you can have in between, you find all of the engineers are almost everything. Normally engineers would operate, some of them implement, and others can even do some conceptions. And this makes the map that the Washington Accord uses to define the competencies that we would like. The race is long. I'm not going to talk about that race, but that academia and industry do differ in the race. We would like to find harmony between academia and industry so that we work together on a quadruple helix that the executive director has talked about in the morning. So we would like engineers to be taught in a very sexy manner. We don't want to scare students. So we want to have engineering like how we perceived it when we joined. Not that you have to be under a drip and study all night. So we must have new ways of teaching, especially mathematics. It must be demystified. It's not a difficult subject. It's logic. It's all those other things. It's something that if you, from the beginning, start teaching your children to play with numbers, be they male or female, and you make sure that they are properly oriented for mathematics, that's the easiest. The executive director has told us that we need academia, and we have plenty of them today. We also need industry and business. We also need governments and the public sector, because certain roles are done by governments. They cannot be done by FAO. They cannot be done by the Ghana Institution of Engineering. But those, then we work together with the government and our partners to make sure that we put in place our accreditation system based on those. We have already heard from Ron and from the last speaker. Some jobs will be lost during, some have been lost already. Typists, I don't think any MD here would have a dedicated typist. Dockers, milkmen, all those are gone, you know, and many more jobs. So some universities are busy teaching students skills that they will never use, that are not needed by industry. So we need to have a mindset shift. There will be new jobs. There will certainly be new jobs coming. You know, digital historian, a truth engine mediator in courts. With the new technology now, you may not need borders, you may not need customs. Blockchain will do all sorts of things. So those are some of the things that we are looking at. But basically, let me finalize by saying that over and above the accords, we also have the 4 competence recognition mobility agreements. These agreements are very important. We have the professional engineers, international professional engineers agreement, where regions agree, say in West Africa, like where you are gathered today, that we competently recognize the West African Professional Engineers Regional Agreement. And this is done through mutual recognition agreements and the harmonization process and also the academic alignment. In Asia, they have what they call the APEC Corporation, which is the professional engineers in Asia, the ASEAN Engineer, and we also have the International Engineering Technologist Agreement, and also the Agreement for International Technicians, which is the International Engineering Technicians Agreement Mobility Forum. These are competence recognition agreements. So we will, as FAO, follow through the regional Europe, what Europe has done, what Asia has done. We will work with FIAPI. We will work with FIANI, the European organization, the Asian organization. We met in China as FAO, FIAPI, and FIANI, and we are mapping up an agreement of cooperation. FAO is ourselves, the federation. FIANI is the Federation of European National Engineering Organizations. And then FIAPI is the Asian organizations. which is the FAO of that. So those, I will give you the full, basically the full presentation, but I'll just in a minute or two go through what we want to do. FAO will create a engineering standards generating body, and this body will have a generic engineering qualifications and will follow our national qualification frameworks, and then we also have access into the profession like yourselves, so that we articulate with the progression and the new thinking and the philosophy, especially in Industry 4.0. Again, we will emphasize on strict code of ethics and professional conduct, and the mutual recognition agreements will be made among yourselves. There will be pipelines that are quite clear, and the bodies will look into what we have done. I'm not going to say how we are going to deal with the African Union, but you have articulated in the previous presentation, but we have a roadmap of how we are going to harmonize using the agreements, the AU and the EU funding that has been availed since 2012 for this process. So we are going to follow the IEA process as FAO, and then our accreditation and certification process will fit with the FAO's vision for Africa 2063, which the president-elect will be working with with their team. So I think this maps out exactly what we want to do. The action is we must have regional centers of excellence like WAFIO that are owners of their context of the harmonization process. Again, we are going to work with these organizations that I have spoken about already and ensure that we benchmark together with the region. So as I always say, if we want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, let's get to work together in this accreditation journey.
Thank you very much, Martin. I want to apologize profusely for the absence of the programs. We were promised 9 o'clock, and then 12 o'clock, and it's 5. We work intensely to make sure that they are delivered to your rooms tonight. But I want to announce certain changes tomorrow so that you can take note. The morning sessions, the technical sessions, there will be 3 parallel sessions in the morning. There will be one on energy development in Ghana. The session facilitator will be Engineer Theoni Okai. There will be a presentation of future power generation in Ghana by VRA. There will be a presentation on the state of the national grid by Ghana Grid Company Limited. Ghana Gas would give us a presentation on Ghana Gas Infrastructure Master Plan. And then the Energy Commission is supposed to give us perspectives of the future energy sector in Ghana. That will happen in this room, Nyansapo. Nyansapo in this room. That's the name of this room, Nyansapo. And that is at 9 a.m. between 9 and 11. There will be a parallel session on nuclear energy development in Ghana. The session facilitator is Engineer Ludwig Hesse. And the room is organization. That is the overflow room to your right. Organization. And there are going to be 4 different technical papers. Adjacent economic benefits of Ghana's nuclear power program, non-electric applications of nuclear power, certified nuclear engineers, are they a risk to Ghana's nuclear power program, and developing a civil nuclear power program in Ghana. So the nuclear energy development program will be in organization room tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. The 3rd session will be on sustainable national infrastructure. Session facilitator is Engineer Dr. Charles Adams. It will be in room Nunya. Nunya is right up there, very close to the restaurant. It's called room Nunya. And there will be technical presentations on concrete block pavers, predicting and increasing the design life of concrete structures, excess reinforcement yield stress, a blessing or a curse, protecting our roadway infrastructure, a shared responsibility, and the National Railway Master Plan. We expect the Ghana Railway Development Authority to give us a session on that. So we sincerely apologize for the lack of the absence of a program as at now, but we hope that by the end of today we should be able to get it into your rooms, and definitely by tomorrow morning you should have them. We now call on the President of WAFIO, His Royal Highness, to give us our closing remarks. Please welcome Engineer Otis Enieji.
Thank you, Mr. General Secretary of WAFIO and the Executive Director of GHIE. The President, Ghana Institution of Engineers, the engineering, the President, Ghana Institution of Engineering, the President, FAO, let me use his terminology. He was talking about SAFIO, NAFIO, EAFIO, FIANI, FIAPI. And he made every letter of it. Each has a definite meaning. When he was talking of WAFIO, SAFIO, EAFIO, these are African sub-regional engineering organization bodies. And FIAPI, FIANI, as he has already explained, European and Asian federations. I think that really I have got more than I bargained for from this interaction here today. And again, I must make a confession that when we started this work on harmonization of standards in the various sectors in West Africa, we had done twice on telecoms, and we had also done something on energy. But I think we have gained the greatest mileage from what we have done today, because we could really say, let us set up a committee to sift virtually all the things we are looking for from the presentations that we have had this evening. For example, not I am one of those who do not know how much effort had been made in the past towards the harmonization of the standards in engineering education. And from one of the presentations here, you could really say that it is devoted to the documenting the efforts that have already been done. And for those also who have been looking for new or renaissance teaching of engineering, I will think that what was started in Sierra Leone last year with our partners from Germany, I think, have really found practical African application in what Professor Fred has shown us today. First of all, he has really, demystified that overlordship of mathematics in engineering. And confirmed something that many of us do not really quite realize, that you could come to engineering from the biological sciences. It's not so common here, but if you are into plastics engineering, for example, you certainly will see those whose background have been biology, and they get right into some form of plastics applications that you need a lot of biology to deal with. And it is something that shows we are really moving towards where we can
like architects, begin to produce products that will leave school and begin to really do something with their hands on. So I thank the various presenters, especially the visiting professor that has given us the nexus really between practice and academics, talking about the construction industry, which really is perhaps the biggest customer to our engineering education sector. We would gain a lot from that, and like I said, when we put up the committee that will sift out these things and plot the roadmap that we are going to follow towards a fuller realization of what those minimum standards are. The various lectures also help us to affirm that we are not going into micromanagement of university programs. Each university has to be unique in order to really be a product that people will want to put money in, and they will also derive surpluses and sustainability from. I mean, Oxford is not Cambridge, and Cambridge is not Oxford, but they have all made their names, and everybody wants to go there to study. Everybody wants to put some money down for research and other such activities. This is what we hope that one day we are going to achieve over here. The last thing I would like to say is that one would like to see something that would help in the realization of what Professor Fred talked about, trying to help instill skills in our students, since we cannot really get all the industries that would absorb the teeming population of our university students. One of the things that we have failed to appreciate in curriculum planning and development in engineering is that we usually don't do that beginning from the definition of engineering. One of the presenters defined engineering using the template of Abet. But there is even a simpler definition of engineering, which says engineering is the application of the sciences, physical, biological, natural, and the rest of them, to the solution of the problems of humanity in a safe, economical, healthy, and environmentally sustainable manner. And going through this definition, you'll find that we realize the fullness of it over our lifetime in practice. But it is possible to really make every graduating student have a bit of all of this. Because what it means is that if we recognize that engineering is a problem-solving group of disciplines, then we must try to teach our students some elements of problem solving. And having done that, we must also recognize that the application of these sciences are the normal thing we get from the curriculum as it is now. And somehow, parts of that must continue. But then, when you say that the solutions have to be safe, in a safe manner, then we must teach some elements of safety engineering to the students. We don't leave them until they go to the workplace and then they will begin to deal with the labor laws and the factories acts and so on and so forth. We can get some low credit courses and sensitize them to that. The same thing with health. We now even have biomedical engineering, we have hospital engineering, we have clinical engineering, and all these can be put together to give a student what it is like. The healthy aspects or the health aspects of engineering. We are supposed to be doing something about the economic side, because ordinarily every student is supposed to go through engineering economy before going out. But I had seen some universities that do not do that. But it is important that we make sure that we continue to put students through engineering economy. But then we must add some elements of cost engineering, which is different from engineering economy. Elements of engineering valuation of assets. It is different from what estate surveyors do. And then we also need to do some bit of environmental engineering for environmental sustainability dimension of engineering. And I think when we do all that, it's just some 3 credit, 2 credit, or whatever courses that these boys and these ladies and young men should get through, and it provides a lot of practical kind of experience for such a person going into the world, in addition to what he gains from design and other things that are in the normal curriculum. I think he will be really ready to face the workplace in a very productive manner right from the word go. So I once again thank all our presenters and thank all of you, my colleagues, that have stayed on. Despite today being the first day, some people would have arrived today, and by after 5, we are still all here. I thank you all, and I wish the Ghana Association of Engineers a most successful 2019 conference. God bless you all.
An official one. Igwe. We also want to thank very much our Honorable Deputy Minister for Roads and Highways. He was here before we started. He sat through all the sessions right in front here with us. I think he deserves a big round of applause. He's a politician. We have been told that he's stayed with us all through. Friday, we want him to be with us at the dinner, but he has to go to his constituency. So when he's going, prevail upon him to stay with us and leave the campaign this weekend. Honorable Kwabena Owusu Eduomi, thank you very much. We also want to thank our colleagues who are in the overflow room. I don't want to call it the other room again. The place has been packed, and the people have been there taking part and enjoying all that has been going on. That is the room organization. It's the second room we'll be using for our tomorrow's session. And when we close from here, Fayo, the names are plenty. This is Fayo, not Fiapi or Fiani or any other one. It is Fayo is having a meeting opposite the reception. That is, the room is called Nunya. That is where they are having their meeting over there. Whilst they are busy having their meeting, they are the big people. The rest of us will be having a live band and a cocktail. It was it was planned for the pool side, but it looked like the rain was coming. So we have moved to where we had breakfast this morning in the hotel. But in the next 30 minutes, we are starting at 7. In the next 30 minutes, weather permitting, they say the pool side is better. So they want to see whether we can have it by the pool side. And those of you who have heard of Kwampa, that Christmas time, they came up with a local Christmas carol. Chingonia lewa Fanta and a partridge in a pear tree. They'll be there performing for us over there by the poolside. So everybody is invited. Tomorrow morning,
5:30, there'll be a bus going around to the other hotels at 5:15 to pick you and bring you here. 5:15, the other hotels to bring you here. So we can start at 5:30. And then by 5:15, the buses will move from here at 5. 5:15, it will be in the various hotels, pick you and then bring you here to join us by 6. You join us for 30 minutes and then you can go back. So we'll go on the walk. Then you come and join us for the aerobics, because otherwise it has to come around 4:30, which will be a little difficult. The exhibitions are still downstairs. If you are not tired, some of them have paid to be here. So please go and look at what is over there. Tomorrow morning, please don't forget to be there. And the presentations that we have had, because of technology, the lecturers, when you were having your presentation, both here and in the other room, people were taking pictures of every slide. A lot of people were doing every slide which comes out. They take the picture. Some of them are looking at me and then they are smiling. The presentations will be on the website. So even if you took the pictures, you have just wasted the space on your phone. So please, you will have the presentations on the website, on our website. You can download them after. We are not hiding it from you. And all those who have presentations tomorrow, please give it to them at the back, the corner over there, so that we can put it up. We don't want, when it's your time for presentation, then where's your pen drive? There's a virus on it. This pen drive is not good. We don't want this pen drive is too slow. We cannot download. Please give us everything tonight so we can load it up and then we'll have it for tomorrow. Technical trips. We'll be going on the MV Dodi Princess. It is a cruise on the Volta Lake. It has just been recommissioned. First batch is doing that. Those who want to go to Akosombo and then the Bon hydroelectric generating plants, you go there. Then we'll swap. Then those who have gone the first time can now go on the MV Dodi Princess for another 3 hours, whilst the second batch, it's not likely that they will go. They will go home instead of going on the second trip. And then the last point, very important. As we are having this conference, if you have any suggestions, anything we can do, not only with the conference, but with the Ghana Institution of Engineering in general, see me and then give me the comments. Or CED. If you have anything you think we can do as an institution, as you listen to the various things which are coming up, if you think there's something which you have come up with, a brilliant idea which will turn us around to move better in the direction that we are going, tell me or tell ED. We'll pick it up. And then finally, they said that's how charismatic preachers preach. They say 5 and 6 times before they finish their sermon. MIDA is doing an internship and mentorship program for females, STEM focused, with coaching. Deadline for application is Friday, 29th March, just this Friday. So if you know somebody who you think can have that coaching,